2020, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated 3/16/2020. The Governance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask all participants remotely attending this meeting, please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, we'll call the roll to follow procedures. So going to the normal routine, we'll start with Len.
Aye.
Paul.
Aye.
Tina.
Here.
Scott.
Here.
And Sam here. Okay. So that's done. Before we actually get started, I was going to just, I think we all watched firsthand on Wednesday how fragile democracy is at the highest level of government. But there's, lessons there for both state and local government. And for the five of us, we really need to make sure that as we review the governance of Holliston, we need to be sure that what we're recommending in bylaw changes will improve the ability of the town to meet, I think the increasingly challenging demands facing town government, but also better serve of all the residents, or as many residents as we can. So anyway, we got to make sure that people understand that government works at the local level, even if it's a little chaotic right now at the national level. So with that,
well said, Sam. And I have National Guard on my property right now.
Good. Well, if we need them here or anywhere, let us.
Just don't wear the horns, okay, Paul? Take the horns off. I'm sure it's not the first time you've had them on your front lawn.
We got to reassess the membership of this committee. All right, so before we get too silly, why don't we start with the approval of the minutes of December 8th that Paul sent out.
A motion to approve the minutes of December 8th. Scott?
Second.
Len Engel, second.
Okay, all in favor? We'll go through the roll call again. Len?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
And Sam? Aye. All right, so the minutes are approved. So next item is really what we're calling further review of draft articles. I mean, we've seen these articles before, but the bylaw development article, there are a few changes that are in purple and one that's sort of a bigger paragraph with a couple options behind that. So that'll probably take a little more time, but others probably aren't that aren't that large a change. So I think it's first page stays the same. Second page 2.4 action on the operating budget. This I think was changed to include capital expenses for the ensuing fiscal year, along with the budget message, budget summary, and supporting documents. So I think that's really the only change. And then down below in 2.7, the budget, the ensuing year was included, but adopted as opposed to as requested by the school committee. It's now as adopted by the school committee, or the budget adopted by the school committee. So that's the only change there. Any issues there with anybody?
It's Scott. Sam, where are these comments coming from? Is it legal?
No, we haven't done that yet.
Right, okay.
So that'll come when we finish this work and we're satisfied with the language, then we'll send it on to town council for review.
Okay.
And you know, at that time, we can also start to schedule meetings. So presentation to town meeting on page 3, section 3.2. In the main draft is the first option, but you also have pages that have 2 other options. I think on this, this is a result of sort of a meeting or a discussion I had with Michael Boynton, who is the town manager in Medway. And he had raised the issue of that in Medway, they have a provision that the select board and the finance committee meet after the finance committee has presented its recommendations to the town administrator. And we didn't have something like that. So what we had before was a sort of assuming that there would be efforts on the part of either the town administrator or the select board or head of the finance committee or the whole committee to come together to try to reconcile differences so that there could be a sort of joint presentation of a single budget. I think that's not necessarily, I mean, I think the effort is there, but you know, it's other towns where there are differences, then they go forward, many of them, with the basically the select board's budget, and then the finance committee has the first right of the ability to make a recommendation. And then the town meeting decides between the two. So the purple option 1 that's in here was included because it made that provision. But it also had language that I was, I guess, concerned it might sort of poke the bear, if you will. So that language is underlined, thinking that we could either approve this as it is or approve it without the underlined part. But that still gave us the ability, if we chose, to go to option 2 or option 3. Option 2 was what was originally proposed the last time we all looked at this. And option 3 is just what the original proposal was. So, I mean, I think that option 1 and 2 is better. And I like, personally, I like option 1, but I could also see it with or without the underlying part.
Is that Scott, is that the option 2 is without the finance committee chart changes? Is that option 2?
Yeah, that was not including
The underline.
the underlying, well, the underlying part or the requirement that the select board and town and finance committee, meet to review the finance committee's budget. So neither of those are in option 2.
Again, Sam, where do I find option 2?
Oh, there was a separate page that had all 3 options. It also had section 2.5 on action on the operating budget.
Oh, right.
To show that up front, before you even got to this part, we were providing the select board to present the budget, or should the town administrator to present the budget to the select board to act, and then it be sent to the finance committee.
Got it. I see it.
So that's just saying really what we're saying in option, or reinforcing in option 1 was stated previously.
Sam, it's Paul LeBeau. In the language of option 1, at the end of the first paragraph, I'm sorry, in the second paragraph, the purple, it says that the select board's proposed budget accompanied with the finance committee's recommendations will be available at least 7 days prior to the date on which the town meeting acts on the proposed budget. Do you envision that there would be a written report that would have both the selectmen's recommended budget, the select board's, recommended budget, and the finance committee's recommendations where they differ in front of people at town meeting?
Yeah, I would, I guess, presume that the finance committee would take the select board's budget and then include wherever they would make a recommendation different than the budget.
Right,
Yeah.
after having met together and resolve some differences and perhaps not others.
Yeah, I mean, the timing isn't in here, but I mean, the 7 days for the finance committee to, I guess, post its report was there originally. And this is assuming that the first paragraph where select board and finance committee would meet would come before the 7 days, so they could resolve whatever differences they had. But what would be left in terms of differences would be noted in the report that the finance committee would submit of the budget.
Right.
I mean, I've seen that in the Westwood annual meeting report, where it was basically taking the select board's budget, and then the finance committee would say whether they agreed, or if they didn't disagree, what their recommendation would be, and explain with an explanation.
So Sam, it's Scott. It sounds like there would be a meeting between, among the select board, finance committee, and include the town administrator before that 7-day time frame. Let's say 14 days before the town meeting, of which they would iron out the differences, and then the 7-day, they would show anything left that they haven't agreed upon?
Excuse me, I think so, yes. And then we also presume, without it written here, that the town administrator and the finance committee chair would get together before the two boards would get together, so that there could be a sort of a seamless kind of meeting with knowing what the disagreements would be, and see whether, the boards could settle it before you make the report to town meeting, or report that gets posted.
And in theory, Paul, if I remember correctly, there's only a handful of items that there's any, call it significant differences over on an annual basis. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I believe that is right, Scott. And I think the differences in the omnibus budget were especially few. I think more often the differences between the select board and the finance committee related to special articles for, capital things or other kinds of things beyond just the operating budget.
Yep.
And where does the school
Well-
budget fit into this? Sorry, this is Len Engel. Where does this fit into this?
When the finance committee, when the select board submits its budget to the finance committee, it also submits the budget approved by the school committee to the finance committee. So both would go to the finance committee at the same time.
So, so this opportunity is then to have the select board and FinCom meet after that process to work out any differences. What if the differences are related to the school budget? Or is that not an issue?
Well, I think, this is Sam, I'll finally get around to that. This goes back to an earlier conversation we had, where we had some language that made it seem that the town administrator could change the school budget, in terms of, once the school committee has approved their budget, I guess it would, assuming they're within, the dollars that would be available, then there would be no change. But it's only the school budget once appropriated where there can be no change, based on, state law, that's the purview of the school committee to make any determination of allocation of funds based on the final appropriation. But before you get to the appropriation, I mean, as has been the case, I think, with the finance committee and maybe the select board as well, if it's exceeding sort of the parameters set out for the school department, then there's discussions as to, where they would squeeze elsewhere to make room or just not include. Paul, you have a better working sense of that.
Yeah, well, when I was involved, it was really a debate between the school committee and the finance committee as to the school budget. And the select board really had no role in that process. And I think Len brings up a good point, which is, if there is a difference of opinion between or among the select board, the finance committee, and the school committee regarding the school budget, is that going to get resolved at that final meeting? And again, I'm just thinking out loud, but is there a possibility that the school committee requests X amount, the selectmen recommend Y amount, and the finance committee recommends Z amount for the school budget?
I mean, this is Sam, there could be, but I would think that until it's an appropriation, the three boards have to work it out. And if they don't, it ends up being whatever the select board recommends.
Right. And it just, again, Paul LeBeau, from a practical standpoint, if there's a disagreement regarding the school budget coming down to the final, 2 weeks before town meeting, then it would seem to me that anybody involved from the select board or the finance committee in setting up that final meeting would have the sense to include the school committee in hopes of resolving that issue.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see it anywhere else where Sam again, the school, these kind of meetings. Actually, I did look at a number of other towns to see if I saw similar language in their bylaws regarding select board and finance committee meeting. I didn't. So I think it works there similar to the way it works in Holliston now, that it's an informal practice that's followed to try to reconcile differences, but not necessarily required.
It might be nice to have a situation at that last meeting where the board of selectmen are advocating for the school department's budget with the finance committee.
The difference in all this is that unlike the select board created through the town administrator creating its budget and the finance committee creating its budget and then trying to reconcile the two documents, I mean, the intention here is that the process will change so that it's the town administrator that prepares or compiles the budget and the select board approves it. And only after that does it go to the finance committee. Now that should also resolve the issue of what we've been hearing of department heads that have a meeting with the select board and then the very next day have a meeting with the finance committee over their budget. And way wondering who should they follow in terms of direction.
Sounds like my house. Go to mom and then I'll go to dad. Actually, nix that. I'll just go to mom. Well, I had a good conversation with the Maynard town administrator and had read the bylaws in advance of that. And they have the town administrator puts together the budget under the select board, all their groups, all the different town budgets. The school committee puts together its budget. Those budgets are put together, combined. Town administrator does all the work to hold those things together with the guidance that they've already got on the amount that's available to spend, any changes, in the past year, things like that. That budget is then sent to the select board. the select board, and then they're charged in the bylaws to have a joint budget review hearing, public hearing involving the select board and the finance committee to go through what has been sent to the select board to consider. At that point, they then go to their separate corners, and the select board works on the town, the budget that's going to be that it's going to propose to town meeting, and then they come back at the end, and FinCom has an opportunity to go through that and file amendments that the select board can or cannot, decide to accept, and then it goes to town meeting, and the town FinCom then has the opportunity to have its amendments that have not yet been adopted that they wish to have town meeting consider reviewed first, considered first. So they have that first, the meeting at the beginning sort of sets the tone of the direction of where each one is going to go. And then they have the opportunity to work out their own budgets. And then at the end, FinCom comes back and says, we'd like this added, or we'd like this subtracted, or money shifted around, and select board, can do that, can accept that or not. And then leave it up to town meeting for final. So it seems that in that case, select board drives the process forward from that initial budget review hearing that occurs. FinCom is responsible for setting up its own budget process, is required to have a public hearing for the amendments it's going to consider, or it would like to consider, or other things that the public wants to have considered as part of the budget. So there's, I think, ample opportunity throughout a process like that for those two things to be reconciled. And I guess the assumption here is that occurs, but not until the very end.
Well, this is Sam. I mean, the proposal does stipulate at the beginning of the budget process that the various parties come together and discuss, the financial position of the town, and, perhaps what guidelines could be. And then the town administrator comes back and soon after, issues the guidelines. So there is that early conversation, not the same as Maynard, but sort of the marching orders are set early on, and then the select board through the town administrator, creates the budget, approves the budget, sends it on with the school committee budget to the FinCom that reviews, and then they come together and try to resolve any differences. But if not, then the select board budget goes to town meeting, and the finance committee is able to make recommendations for different articles where they have disagreements. But the hope being that, they would, in the course of the budget development period, reconcile those differences and come in with one document.
I guess my only takeaway is it sounds like what we're adding here is just sort of a codification of what we hope they would do anyway. Right? We hope that they'll get together at the end of this and resolve differences, reconcile the budget so that everybody's reasonably happy, and then move forward. And that seems to be what we're driving at, is codifying that last meeting, giving them a chance to come together, reconcile this, and then give the final say to the select board to present its budget to town. Is that?
Yeah, this is Sam. It was made because I was impressed with Michael Boynton in his comment about how well that process works of having the select board and the finance committee come together and try to reconcile differences. That it was, he was very pleased by the way the process worked, and the effort on both parties to come up with a single budget. But if not, then the finance committee would have first whack at amendments or an amendment to where in a budget account or an article where they differed.
This is Tina. I guess going back to the underlying section in option 1, I want to get a reading from the group if they think that language is necessary or constructive. Because I'm not sure that I think it is.
What happens if you remove it? It's the same thing, right? It's just stating the obvious.
Right.
Yeah, it just,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, that the select board will adopt the budget for the ensuing year and present it to town meeting, which is a repeat of really what's said in section, what is that, 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's the difference. And that's an important difference because state law basically stipulates that if there's no bylaw to the effect that the select board submits the proposed budget to town meeting, that it falls on the finance committee.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're recommending a change where the select board prepares the budget and then after adopting it, submits it to the finance committee. So the finance committee's role, which is its legal role with that kind of a bylaw, is really to review and recommend and explain their recommendations. So they play an extremely important role in terms of being that independent outside financial body that reviews the details of the budget, but its role is to review and recommend, not create the budget.
I guess the other piece to Tina's point that I think I'd suggest pulling or getting a better understanding of is the last sentence of that first paragraph. The finance committee shall present its recommendations to town meeting. Wouldn't those just be amendments to the budget?
No, well, that's what it would be. It would be its recommendations. Its report would be, recommendation it makes that differs from what's in the final select board budget.
Okay.
That is that's presented to town meeting.
And it's Scott, normally, Len, I think what would happen is those articles or whatever might be in the omnibus, which tends to not happen, where they disagree, that's where you would see it. It says, FinCom does not support this.
Right.
And that would be the 1, 2, 3, whatever items that really the discussion's all about with the town. The other ones are, yes, we agree with the select board, and town, you guys do agree with us. And then, so I think that's typically what happens, and that's what should happen.
So the recommendations are only in relation to what they would propose the amendment to be. We recommend a different amount for this than than is being proposed by the select board.
Yeah, they actually say, it's Scott, they actually say something like, we don't agree, or we don't recommend, this is what we recommend.
Right. Okay.
And then the town's discussion goes on, right, Paul?
Yes, and I would just point out that the finance committee also makes recommendations on a number of articles in the warrant.
Right.
Relating to finances. And some of them don't even involve an appropriation. It's just that it's related to finances, policies or renewals of procedures that we have to do every year at town meeting. So the finance committee's report with respect to the omnibus under this proposal would be, as you point out, a list of possible exceptions to the budget recommended by the finance committee, and then their recommendations on a number of other articles in the warrant.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Sam. I should point out, I think that the finance committee has the ability to comment, make recommendations on any article that's in the warrant, whether it's financial or not, even organizational issues.
I think that was part of my question about the use of that term of recommendations in there. Is what are they related strictly to financial, the budget amendments that it wants to see, or the recommendations beyond just the financial aspect of the recommendation. They agree with or do not agree with that particular expenditure.
Yeah, I think that they do have the ability to review and comment on any article, irrespective of whether it's financial or not. Tomorrow I'll send the section of state law that I'm referring to you.
Hey, Sam, it's Scott. Can I ask, so the difference between the purple and the blue, option 1, option 2, is just removing the underline?
No. Option 1,
So it's 1, 1A, 2, and 3.
yeah, there's option 1. The purple also provides for the select board and the finance committee meeting to try to reconcile differences.
Yep, yep. And by removing the underline, I mean, again, it's removing something that would have to, that they have the right anyway, right?
Yes, yeah. It just trying to make it more low key, I guess, or not inflammatory in any way, and saying you can do whatever you want, irrespective of the finance committee.
But couldn't someone interpret, it's Scott, couldn't the finance committee interpret that saying, you need me regardless, because it doesn't say you can do this without me? It's there for a reason. It's not there to placate anybody. It's not there to, it's there to, for clarification. I'm no lawyer, but I like when it's spelled out, black and white. So there's no ambiguity that can the select board do this without the finance committee changes. But that's me.
Yeah, I don't know that you need the underline, in the sense that the key point is that it reinforces what's said in section 2.5 above, that it's the select board that's presenting the proposed budget to the town meeting. And whether it's with or without finance committee recommendations is not all that important.
Paul, may I ask your opinion on that?
The underlined phrase?
Yes.
Well, I think it states the obvious, but I think it also clarifies that there'll be a joint meeting and the differences between the two groups will be considered and discussed, but ultimately the select board will send a budget to town meeting that either does or does not include the finance committee changes. So there's no doubt that the select board has that authority. In either event, the finance committee is going to get its recommendations to town meeting in writing in its report, whether if the selectmen don't adopt them. So they're going to have another shot at it after that joint meeting. They're going to have another shot to change the budget to what they think it should be when they get to town meeting. And I think the language with or without is in at least a couple of other towns' bylaws or charters. And it's a form of clarification. I suppose, given the environment we're going to be dealing with in the next few months, it might be viewed by some people as kind of sticking a finger in somebody's eye. But it doesn't say anything that isn't already
Okay.
implied,
Yeah,
Got it.
thank you. This is Tina. Thank you for, giving both sides of that argument. I think I would agree with both Paul and Scott that maybe explicit clarification is useful in that case.
Okay, so why don't we, of the three options, are we saying we're going to settle with option one and take away the underline? Is that where the consensus is?
With the underline.
I'm fine with the underline. I mean, I think I saw it in a couple of other bylaws as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, this is the exact language from Medway.
Paul LeBeau, I think what we're saying is that we'll take away the underlining, but leave the words above it.
Right, right.
Yeah, right. right.
Okay. So let's see what's left.
That was it.
I think, yeah, page 4 and page 5, we made no changes, so
Right.
that would deal with the budget development bylaw. So the other one, and I don't think we've made any changes since we last looked at it, and the changes that we made when we last looked at it was the blue, but the Article 1 town meetings, where we're making it clear that the annual town meeting and the authority of an annual town meeting applies to both May and fall or October town meetings. They're both equally annual town meetings. And then to give a little more time for budget preparation, I think we added another week to May and I think even October. So I think that's pretty much the changes. But Paul put this together, at least what I'm looking at it, the sort of annotated version, which not only shows what's new, but has little boxes just clarifying the changes that are made. But I think what I had noted was that the most important of the changes.
Are we talking about Article 4?
No, Article 1, town meetings.
Hmm,
Thank you. I was pulled up the wrong one.
okay.
Article 1, which one's that?
Yeah, I don't see it either.
I don't think, I'm not sure if I sent it, but you've had it.
Okay, yeah, we've had that one before. There's just some clarification in there. Is that what you're saying?
And nothing's changed.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay. And then the next one was Finance Committee. We have sort of all I did was really, I think, have different headings to try to allow somebody to go through this annotated version and be able to fully understand the changes that were made. And so, you know, with I think 7 different sections in the Finance Committee bylaw, the first 3, you know, there's no changes. Everything stays the same. So the number of members, how they're selected, stays the same. Section 4, which is sort of the explanation of the purpose of the Finance Committee, the authority that it has.
That's the blue?
That's the blue. And what that does, it doesn't change the authority at all. It really provides further explanation of it. So, you know, I think it adds to a better understanding of the role of the Finance Committee than what's currently in Section 4. You know, it's almost twice the size. And there's really 2 sections of law that it includes. I mean, it's the transfer of funds from the reserve fund, and also making recommendations to the town. And then the kind of questions that it's trying to see if I can find what I was looking for. And the Finance Committee may consider proposed action under all articles in the warrant for a town meeting and questions regarding the administration of town offices and departments for the purpose of making reports and recommendations to the town. So
Yep.
it's just a broader explanation of the existing duties, authority of Finance Committee. It doesn't add to it. It doesn't take away from it. It just does a better job explaining it. So that's section 4. And then section 5, we're going to recommend it be deleted only because it's basically replicated in the budget bylaw that we're recommending. And then section 6, in terms of being able to require town officials to provide more information.
What's
That-
2-2? Sam, sorry, recommended section 2-2. Why is that there?
That's in the budget development bylaw, which basically says the same thing that section 5 in the FinCom bylaw provides. Actually, it says a little bit more.
Oh, I see. That's why you took it out, because it's already in the other. I got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
one is, it's taken out of it's part of the Finance Committee responsibilities, but it's taken out of the Finance Committee bylaw because it's already in the budget development bylaw.
Yep.
And that's true of section 6 as well.
Yeah, replaced by 3.1. Got it. Yep.
And
Same
then
with 7.
section 7 is, let's see.
That's replaced by section
Yes,
3.6.
that's replaced by section 3.2, which is on the 3rd page. So it's, again, it's not taking it away, it's just putting it somewhere else. So it's in the budget development bylaw rather than the Finance Committee bylaw, but it applies to the responsibilities of the Finance Committee, so it doesn't change it. And then section 7 has a couple different parts. So there's the first couple lines. We're taking that out of the Finance Committee bylaw because it's the one that provides that in the Finance Committee report, there's a page that allows residents to volunteer for services. And as we've talked before, we
Oh, yep.
proposed the talent bank, which is an electronic, much improved system. And so we would take out those sentences, and then the last sentence, no appropriation shall be made until a report thereon has been received from the Finance Committee. I think we heard from Corporation Counsel or Town Council that that's unenforceable, in that the Select Board is responsible for preparing the warrant, and the Finance Committee's role is to review the warrant articles and make recommendations. It doesn't have the ability to stop action if they don't do something. So I've asked, I thought early on, very early on when we first started, there was some communication with Town Council on this issue. And I believe that the comment was that it was unenforceable. I've recently sent to Travis this section of the sentence and the explanation and asked him to go to Town Council and make sure that this is an accurate explanation of why it's okay to take that sentence out. So, you know, this was to be done so that it's ahead of time, but when we're finished and we have settled on what we want to recommend, the whole package will go to Town Council for review. But this is sort of getting a quicker answer. To make
So
sure.
Sam, it's Scott. So section 7, is it deleted because we're saying in red they can't do this, and the reason they can't do it is what's saying in black, the rationale behind it?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
Sam, it's Paul LeBeau. If that section were enforceable, then the finance committee could prevent an appropriation by simply failing to make a recommendation.
That's exactly, that was my point,
Right.
Sam, to town council as to why I was raising the question, is this something that should be in this, in the town bylaws?
Right. It's kind of like a self-pardon.
Yeah. I've heard that lately. All right, so that takes us through the finance committee. It's basically keeping most of it, but splitting them up into two parts, because one is more fitting with the, the budget development bylaw, which didn't exist before.
Okay,
Now there's,
3.
I sent, I think one. I had everything here. I sent something that we could include or not. It's the board of, it's Article 3. Article 3 will change because of the talent bank, where that's in talking to, or in conversations that Travis and Liz Greendale had together, they thought that it was more appropriate for that to be housed with the select board bylaw, not the town clerk, which is what was originally proposed. So that would be an additional section that would be added to the select board bylaw, Article 3. Also noticed in Article 3 on the power to appoint, there was language that seemed to be inconsistent with the special act creating the town administrator. And this is something that we could address now or wait until we come back and look at recommendations we might make regarding the town administrator. But it basically, Section 4, power to appoint, reads that the Board of Selectmen shall have the power to appoint various officers, constables, members of town boards, commissions, and committees as provided or allowed by general laws and these bylaws. It doesn't add special town acts, because the special town act for the police chief search and the fire chief search basically says that the town administrator goes through a interview process and then submits finalists' names to the select board. And that's totally ignored here unless we were to add town special acts to each of 4, 5, and 6. And again, it doesn't have to be done for the May town meeting. It could be wait until we get to the town administrator, or since we're already going to deal with the select board, this is pretty simple, straightforward.
Hey, Sam, it's Scott. They follow that now anyway, right? They,
Hope so. I don't know.
yeah, so we're, again, stating the obvious or clarification.
Yeah, just making it, just updating the bylaws so they reflect the current requirements.
Yep.
So I think the issue is, do we want to include that for May, or since we're going to recommend a change for Article 3 anyway, or wait? I don't know.
I'm- It's Scott. I think it's fine to add it. I don't see why not. Do you want to talk, are we talking about 5 and 6 as well, or is that just all inclusive, right?
All 4, 5, and 6.
Yep, I think that's fine.
Yeah, I agree. This is Len. Makes sense.
Okay,
Christina, I agree.
simplifies things.
Yeah, Paul, I agree as well. If for some reason, as we get close to May, we were asked to kind of shorten our list of changes, this would be the first one to come out because it's
Right.
not critical. I mean, as I understand it, a special act takes precedence over the bylaw, so it's, they can still function the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, but it's, and I don't know that, I mean, I think this is Sam again, that Travis would probably note that with the board, but this just, I mean, it just updates and
Right.
makes current the,
Yep.
requirement in terms of appointment of police chief and fire chief. That it's not just up to the select board to do that.
Right. I agree. It should be done, but just, if for some reason we have to, if we have to shorten our list come May, then that might be the one to pull out, but we'll see.
Yeah. This is Sam. I mean, having said that, I don't disagree, but I've been thinking about the select board wanting us to sort of have this time frame of deal with, and so I put something together that I didn't want to interrupt what we're talking about today to talk about it, but it looks pretty aggressive. So it's not like the next meeting is going to be a lot shorter than the Maytown meeting in terms of issues we might have before them. But we'll talk about that and decide whether we ought to spread it out a little bit more. Because I'm assuming that there'll be one town meeting that may want to address the issues that the Technical Assistance Bureau of the Division of Local Services recommends in the report that they'll be undertaking, sort of a review of the town operations. So I don't know to what extent, or maybe we'll have addressed a number of the issues they would have addressed before they finish. Don't know, but and then just so you know, there's going to be a need to make sure we don't wait too long to address the issue of the Board of Selectmen. I'm sorry, not the Board of Selectmen, the assessing board, just because there's going to be some changes there. And while that may happen, it's better to use the opportunity to see what other changes we want to make in the bylaws. So our next item on the agenda, number 4, has to deal with the in the month that we were apart, we all had homework to see if we could reach out and contact the various comparable towns that we're developing relationships for, to learn more about how they operate along the lines of areas that we're looking at. And capital budget was the one issue that we wanted to learn more, given the select board meeting where that was a question that was raised by both the school committee members and finance committee member. So I think we've all had successes with some, but not all. And it's still a work in progress, but this would be a time to, if there's anything that can be helpful as to what we're recommending now. Again, what we're envisioning is sort of a capital budget for the ensuing year, the next year coming up, being included in the budget that's addressed at the annual town meeting in May. But, for different reasons, some of that may carry over to the fall town meeting, but it would be part of the budget process. I mean, one of the towns I was dealing with is Westwood, and while I didn't talk to the finance director, she sent me the capital improvement plan that they have, and there's a calendar, and it starts in September and ends at the Maytown meeting. So all the capital work, for the most part, unless there's other extenuating circumstances, gets addressed at the Maytown meeting. And it's sort of like a separate, it's $195 page document. So it's sort of a separate budget unto itself. Not part of sort of the operating budget, but part of the budget that's addressed at the annual town meeting. And I think both Bellingham and Medway also deal with a good part of their capital budget in May. Bellingham also, for the same reason explained by the Finance Committee, waits to deal with some capital issues until the fall, so they have a better sense of free cash. Westwood, with all the commercial property it has, is able to apply some of the new growth to capital spending. I mean, the revenue from new growth, a portion of that becomes part of spending for capital infrastructure. And then obviously taking advantage of state grants through school construction and some operating funds through just as part of the operating budget, as well as the revenues from the capital stabilization fund and free cash. So they're in an enviable position of having a number of different sources.
Yeah, and it's Scott. I think that whole capital budget wrapped in the same time as the operating budget. I would like to have a conversation with Kevin and Rentham. But if I recall my notes originally, that was how they handle it, and he strongly recommends it. So I just want to get more feedback as to why he thinks it works that well.
Yeah, well, this is Sam. I've gone through a number of charters of towns, many of the 15, and I guess what I was impressed with is that in their description of the budget or the operating budget, they have the different components like operating budget, but then they also have capital in there. So they are looking at capital as part of a May town meeting, even if some gets carried over to the fall. But I think Bellingham was talking about 80% of its capital spending is in the fall and only 20% in May, but still part of their operating budget.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Paul, your analysis that you sent, it's typically that way, but every now and then you get a funky year where it's closer to 50-50 for whatever reason.
Yes, in fact, I think the average over all the years we looked at, the spending was about 50% at the spring and 50% at the fall.
Yep.
In terms of dollars. One thing that just occurs to me, for what it's worth, if folks want to take a few minutes when they have a chance, with respect to the last few questions that we had on our list for the capital issues, the Holliston Finance Committee on the town website, go to Holliston, the page for the Finance Committee. They have what they call an approved financial policy. And that addresses in general terms what their targets are for how much money should be spent on capital and what their policies are for managing debt and so forth. That was something that we put together in the last few years. I was working for the town and they've updated them since, I'm sure. But just if you want to do a comparison with what you're hearing from the towns you're talking to and what Holliston has in terms of its policies for some of those things, it's there on the town website.
But Scott, I'm sure the Holliston policies are by far better than any other towns around, if it's run by the FinCom, right?
Yeah, in fact, several of the towns that I've studied, when you go to look at their financial policies, it just says see Holliston.
Whoops.
Well, this is Sam. I think that, as you review what we've just basically approved in terms of language of the budget update, read through that again in terms of the budget and the capital and there's anything that you've learned from the other towns that would warrant our taking another tact, or whether we're okay the way we've got it structured. I mean, this is pretty consistent with what I've seen in a lot of other towns, the way it's written in the budget development update. But that's why it's helpful to, contact these towns and talk to them about the process and see if that gives us any idea for changes from what we're sort of suggesting.
Yep.
I mean, we'll hear from, I'm sure, the school committee and the finance committee, and maybe, the select board, when they react to the details that they'll be getting not too distant. And that may, we'll see whether that is reason for a change or not. But anyway, take advantage of, your discussion with towns in terms of whether we need to go back and look at anything that we've written about how capital budget vis-a-vis operating budget.
Got it.
All right, well, next item is the warrant deadline for the May 2021 town meeting. As you have seen, there's been a release by Travis that March 29th is the deadline to get warrant articles to him for the May town meeting. And I think should be in good shape to do that. But we still have a number of steps to go. Even we take out all the annotated information and just have, the straight dialogue. We'll need the annotated part just so people will understand what we're doing. But when we get to that in the final language, I guess next steps would be to basically start to set up meetings with the various groups that we met before, committees and individual officers, and have them look at the detail ahead of time so that when we discuss it with them, we can get good feedback for any changes. And then I think whatever comes out of that, we then go to the public hearing stage. I have a friend who is on a similar committee in Andover, and they had their first public meeting, I guess a week or so ago, and 10 people showed up.
Yep.
We've got to do a better job of getting the message out.
We'll get 11. That includes us.
Well, we're halfway there then.
Yeah, then we
Yeah.
bring our significant others and
Yeah.
So Sam, if I may, what's the time frame you're thinking about having these meetings with the town officials, et cetera?
Well, I did, in getting an email from Ken, I did say that, we wanted to get together and set up a meeting between our committee and the finance committee. And he had offered January 12th, but I had to decline because I'm introducing a speaker at a Zoom meeting that night, tomorrow night. So I had suggested to him the last week of January or very early February, and then we have to make a decision as to whether since we're a committee that was created by the finance of the select board, do we need to go to the select board first or the finance committee? I mean, we've been dealing with this issue without really providing detail to anybody so far, and now we're at a point where we're ready, I think, to begin to provide that detail and get reaction. And as we did before, meeting with the select board, finance committee, school committee, the 3 financial officers, being the principal assessor, the accountant, and the collector treasurer. Well, they don't, that's a Boston term, collector treasurer, but at least where I've got it, but our treasurer is also the collector, so do we combine that in a title?
Yeah, that officially is currently her title, treasurer collector. We just switch it from the city.
Yeah, trying to be different, huh?
Well, once you get this far west, the language gets kind of garbled.
All right, well, anyway, well, for those three, we had a good meeting with them before, and we need to have
Yeah,
another one with them. And then after we deal with that, you can come up with another group. We can start to talk about, public meeting or hearings of sorts, so that the general public has an opportunity to, learn about what we're recommending and why, and go from there. And then be ready to finalize everything we're going to recommend for May, prior to March 29th, and we should be able to do that. And then gear up for the next town meeting.
I like that.
Sounds great.
So do we have to get together again soon, or is it the next time we get together with officials or whoever?
Well, maybe we could talk about the order of who we want to meet with.
Yeah,
I'm assuming the process will be, we'll send them the details, give them time to review it, and then we'll, have a joint Zoom meeting to talk about it.
if I may suggest, to keep it simple, we have the same order we had last time. So there's no, I forget what the order was, but
I think we started with the select board, then the finance committee, then the school committee, the 3 financial officers.
sure. Works for me. I think it's irrelevant, but that's consistent.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, I know the select board will have no trouble trying to fit us into one of their meetings. Oops, I think can you still hear me? Because I can't
Yep.
see you anymore.
Uh-oh, Sam, you're getting old. You losing your sight that fast?
No, my mouse moved and it screwed everything up.
Well, it's good to know you still have a mouse on your computer.
Yeah, but there's no wires, so I'm really advanced.
There's no
Oh,
tab on
okay,
that.
you're all back.
I like that idea. I've got a hard stop at about 5 minutes, guys, so.
Yeah,
All right.
no, we can be done. All right, so I'll touch base with Travis, find a time. So we can meet with the select board. And Paul, you're gonna do your thing, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Do we need to meet with Travis separately? Or is that assumed as part of the Board of Selectmen?
I think that, yeah, we will do that. Is a quick reaction before we actually have our meeting with the select board.
Yeah,
So we talked about that before, and it makes sense. But it would be without, well, once we meet with the select board, then it's all out there. So
Oh, yeah.
want to meet with Travis before that.
for all 11 residents to,
Reactive.
Put up your spam filters when that happens.
cool. Sounds like a plan.
All right, so we're going to be set on language on those 3 and the 2 select pieces. So we can get that to Travis, and then we can at the same time schedule the meetings for the select board, Finance Committee and School Committee,
Perfect.
probably at their meetings, so unless we make it separate, because this would, I'm sure with the Finance Committee, this would be a long meeting.
No,
Well, they'll tell us that we don't need to do what we're doing, so.
exactly.
That'll be short.
That's right.
More than 11 people. Sam, do you want to send around just final drafts of all that?
Yes,
Give
That'd be
us
great.
a time frame for us to review. Put us on a short leash.
yeah, well, today's Monday, so if I may be able to get it to you tomorrow, before the end of the week, how's that?
There you go.
Works for me.
I'll-
Okay.
Yep.
I don't want to have all this time and then be caught short at the end in March, so.
That'll happen anyway.
Once we can wrap it up, we can move on to other areas.
Right.
I think the last item on the agenda is public comment. But, don't know that I see anybody that is here to make public comment, but we'll open it up if there is. Hearing nobody, we'll then adjourn.
I
So
make
we're
a
gonna
motion to
roll
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Well, I'll go through the roll call. Len,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
Scott,
All right.
and Sam. Aye. Okay, we're adjourned. And
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Uh,
you.
I guess the next meeting will be, unless